Hello and welcome yet again to another special edition of The View from the Top with me, Brian Friedman, and with Julia Onslow-Cole from Fragomen. Hi there, Julia. Good to have you on the show yet again. We've got a great show lined up for you today. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you're out there in LinkedIn world, please do let us know that you're there. The way this thing works is that we don't know you're there unless you actually write something in the comments box. So please do write in the comments box, let us know. By the way, for the first time, we're going live on Facebook as well. So if you have liked the View from the Top page on Facebook, you'll be seeing this in your feed. If you haven't and you are on Facebook, then please do like the View from the Top on Facebook and follow us there as well. So many thanks everybody for coming in. And it's going to be a fascinating show today. First of all, from Julia's point of view, she will do her regular whistle-stop tour. You're becoming quite a legend in recent weeks, Julia, with these live casts you're doing. Not that you weren't a legend before, but even more of a legend. And I think especially with the announcement in the last 24 hours from President Trump about what's going on in America, I think more than ever, people are going to be absolutely fascinated to know exactly what's going on in the world of immigration. What else are we going to cover in the show? Well, one thing that we're going to just cover very briefly right at the end of the show, which we're going to be covering more tomorrow, is the pro bono COVID-19 support tool that Beneva has launched. Many companies have joined in this global initiative. I can't mention all of them. I can't remember all of them offhand, but companies, obviously Fragomen, NetExpat, Impact Group, World Pet Travel, many others, numerous others that I've forgotten and I apologize at this point, have joined this free initiative that we're offering to help out assignees around the world. At the very end of the show today, we will be just giving you a quick sneak preview of some of the things we're doing. But tomorrow, if you join us at the same time, 3 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. Eastern, then we're going to do a full demo. And one of the exciting developments we've launched is a find your employees aspect to this. So the tool can immediately tell you where all your employees are located. But we've also got some great guests on the show today. And let me just tell you who we've got on the show today. First of all, I'm absolutely delighted that we have Sarah Hunt from Mondelez. Sarah is the Global Mobility Director at Mondelez. And it's a hugely well-known company, and she's going to be telling us in a while about her program and about some of the ways that Mondelez has responded, has been forced to respond, and is responding, and is actively planning for the future in the new normal. So welcome on the show, Sarah. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
And then our other guest, I'm delighted to say, is Ed Hannibal. Ed is a principal at Deloitte, but to many people he may be equally well known, maybe even better known, as the chairman of ERC. So it's wonderful to have somebody as prestigious as Ed, as well as Sarah and Julia on the show. And Ed's going to be talking to us, and he's going to tell us a little bit about some of the lobbying initiatives that ERC has been doing, but also he's going to be talking about ways of planning for the next normal as we all try to respond to the situation we're in, to recover from that situation, and to thrive as we prepare for the new normal. So a fascinating show. And then just to let you know, in terms of next week's show, again, we'll be back same time next week. And I'm delighted to say that our special guest next week will be Lynn Shotwell, who is the newly appointed CEO of ERC. Lynn is yet another legend of our industry. It would be great to have her on board. And I think this may well be one of the very first major interviews that Lynn has done. So it'll be great to have Lynn on board next week. Anyway, so that's really all I wanted to say by introduction. But as I mentioned before, please, everybody, do write in the comments box. We want to know your views, any thoughts you've got, any suggestions you've got. Just tell us you're there so we know who's there. We'll give you a shout out. So let us know. But without further ado, what I do want to do is to move on to the global trends that we've started seeing in the world of immigration and travel and visa restrictions. And let me hand over to Julia Onslow-Cole. And Julia, if you can start by giving us your normal tour de force about what's been going on around the world in the last 7 days.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, so I'm just going to give you a global overview, obviously mentioning what's happening in the US, very much breaking news. And then right at the end, I'm just going to mention a trends report that Scott Lieb, who is our Director of Knowledge, is releasing in New York tonight, which is giving you some really good global trends that we're seeing right up to the minute. So starting now with Asia Pac. We've been talking over the last couple of weeks about the concern in China about a second wave of infections, and particularly the fact that nearly all the infections are coming from people who are coming from overseas. And last week I talked about there being this big flare-up in China's remote northern border with Russia, and that situation is continuing. So we do see a continuation of the China travel ban. So that means only Chinese citizens, those with permanent residence, and residents of Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan can enter China. And speaking to Becky Z, who's our partner in China on Monday, she said she thought it was likely to stay in place for at least a month, and then it will be reviewed. And if it's continued, it will be continued for another month. Now, the thing is that this is creating quite some issues for employers who are desperate to bring people back to China, and they are really, really desperate to do that. And it's also causing issues now in the region because people are parked in other countries, particularly Singapore, and they are there and they're now having problems because they have to extend their visas while they're waiting to get back in China. So inside China, what we're seeing right at the moment is that to renew visas and to do things for processing for people already inside, it's actually coming almost back to normal levels. So that's fine, but we're really concerned about the people who are outside. And you'll remember that last week I did a deep dive on this very difficult situation with if you have a visa that was issued after and anytime after 28th of March, you're going to have an additional visa to re-enter. So anyone who had a visa that was issued before the 28th of March, they will need this additional visa to re-enter. And I explained that there was no consistency of how the consulates in China were applying the process to get this additional visa. So it's quite a difficult process, but when you're back into China and the travel ban's lifted and you can get back in, there is a concession to convert it back into a work permit. So what we're seeing now over last week is a trend of employers increasing the number of permanent residence applications for their employees who already have work permit status in China. And I think that's a really good maneuver because you can then at least ensure that those people will be able to get around the China travel ban, and it means that you're building up your population of workers in China. So in summary on China, I think you should be really considering what to do about the people who need to come back in, think now about how to plan these consular appointments, and also thinking about putting your existing workforce in China, if you are able to do, on a higher immigration status. And we also discussed last week the importance of giving really good advice to your employees of these new regulations. In China now, every single person must wear a mask. There are government-appointed monitors outside apartment blocks, and your temperature is checked as you go into the parking lot and into your office, and you have to have the health code app. And we have had reports this week of some international assignees having a lot of difficulty downloading that app. So it's really important that you're supporting all of your workers with all of these extra regulatory things. So turning to Singapore, Singapore situation is continuing.
Before we just move on, let me just do some shout outs. We've got so many people from around the world who are joining us. Just to let you know, Julia, we've got people from, oh gosh, there's so many, from Sydney, from New Jersey, from Chicago, from Sri Lanka, from Singapore, from Zurich, from Bangalore, from London, from Dallas, Houston, Silver Spring, Maryland, India, Florida, just all over the world. So many thanks. I think we've got nearly 250 people listening live, and I know that typically we get about 5,000 viewers. And many people are saying thanks so much for sharing. It's amazing what you're doing, Julia, and people are really enjoying this. I know you put a lot of effort into it, and it is really, really appreciated by the mobility community. So I just thought I'd let you know who's out there. But anyway, back to your world tour, Julia.
Thank you. It's lovely to for everyone to join, and a particular shout out to the person from Singapore. So the situation in Singapore is that you can only enter if you're a Singaporean or if you have permanent residence, and you're very strictly subject to the stay-at-home notice. We've actually talked about that before and the strictness of how these regulations are being enforced. But this week, I just wanted to give a highlight to the people that I was talking about earlier, particularly from China, who are actually stuck in Singapore and they can't leave because of the travel ban. Now, normally you would just have 90 days as a visitor and it's strictly enforced, but we have managed to extend people exceptionally. And I just wanted to highlight that and the importance of keep going back into your workforce and looking at expiry dates, because I think that we're all rather shocked at how long the lockdown has continued, and we've actually forgetting to check expiry dates sometimes. So we have had some luck in extending people with short-term visit passes. On the last extension we got, it did say on the bottom, final extension warning. But hopefully they still would extend if the situation continues. Looking in Japan, the state of emergency has been extended to the whole of Japan. It seems that they're struggling to contain the virus in Tokyo. And now Japan has a travel ban, it has quarantine measures, and it's suspended visa exemption measures. And so it's sort of joining the raft of other restrictions that other countries in the region are employing. And I also wanted to mention there are some countries in the region that are not so restrictive, like Thailand, for example. It's actually not quite as restrictive, but the difficulty is in practice. It's difficult because employees have to stay at home and they can't get the document stamp that they need to do. So even in countries where it is less restrictive, there's a lot of problems for assignees with immigration applications. Now, I wanted to really say a few words now about the Middle East. And last week and the week before, we really kind of concentrated on Middle East and Africa, but more on Africa. And overnight, I've had the most fantastic update from my partner, Haida Hussein, who actually stayed up all night to write this for us. So it's really up to the minute, and it's really some very good practical tips in here. So we believe that the Ramadan is expected to start from this Friday, the 24th of April. And in the UAE, they have extended the lockdown. There are some positive signs. So Emirates Airlines have just begun a rapid pre-boarding COVID-19 testing at Dubai Airport. And these are for people who are departing Dubai. And you can actually get the results in 10 minutes, and they give the results to the passenger so that they have this test certificate. Now, currently, inbound flights into the UAE are suspended. They're continuing to be suspended, but it's good that these processes are starting to spring up for outbound. And I'm hoping that we're seeing a peak of the cases in the UAE, and we'll move more towards some restrictions being lifted. But at the moment, the travel ban is in place. Only Emirati citizens and immediate family can come in. And we have discussed before on the show how difficult it is to get these exceptional cases through. I mean, really difficult to almost impossible. So the UAE have extended the expiry date of all residence permits and visit visas until that were due to expire after 1st of March to the end of this year. Now that's great. That's really great news for everyone. but employers must plan efficiently what's going to happen, because if you can imagine, at the end of the year, everyone will expire on the same day and there's going to be enormous delays. So we're recommending that you think proactively ahead. And Haider, my partner, was saying he thinks you should diarise this for about 120 days before the end of the year. That's when he thinks you should put in the diary now to deal with your expiries and to deal with the process. Dubai has implemented a process for residents who've lost their job due to COVID-19. They're allowed to stay into the end of the year, and then there's a sort of one-way movement out of Dubai. It's really important. Another sort of thing that Haider was saying, it's really important that employers conduct their own audits and review their company records, because some of these applications have been extended online. We think there's going to be system issues where the dates in people's passports aren't going to be matching the system. And we think that there's a high chance that all passports will be requested for endorsement. And if that happens, given the volume, this is going to be a huge bottleneck. So it's really important that you pre-plan, that you're ready, that you're managing the high volumes for potential rectification of employee documents. And this is going to be really crucial to make sure you don't experience any difficulties and your employees don't when they enter or exit. Now, moving on to Saudi Arabia, that's currently in a lockdown, and there are various movements between cities have now been stopped. There is a very high rise in the number of infections, so hopefully this is the peak. And you can only leave home for essential needs. And private entities in vital sections, they have to obtain a movement permit for their employees to work at offices or on client sites. Now, the penalties for not obeying this are quite strict. They're fines and then potentially a jail sentence. And unbelievably, people have been breaching these orders and posting on social media them actually doing this. So there have been, some prosecutions, and you really must tell your employees again to obey all the regulations. In Saudi, there is no entry of foreign nationals for residence permits. And the important thing to say is that commercial flights into Saudi have now been suspended, except for exceptional flights for returning Saudi nationals. But the authorities have recently opened outbound flights, which is really good news, because we had a lot of foreign nationals who wanted to return to their home country, and they were hoping to be repatriated by their governments, and they haven't been able to, so they were stuck in Saudi. But what they must do is they must file a request through the government portal. So they can't just get on a plane, they have to file a request. And then finally, there's a range of concessions that are quite complicated in Saudi, but there are different concessions for different groups. And if anyone wanted any more information on that, you can contact me through LinkedIn, and I'd be very pleased to give it. And of course, we have our Fragomen COVID-19 microsite, which also contains this information. So just wanting to say other country updates in the region. Iraq has eased restrictions, allowing government officials to keep staffing levels now at a maximum of 25%, which means we can start to see some immigration processing. Oman has extended its lockdown until May the 8th, and many other countries within the region remain under lockdown. I'm not going to say much about Africa. We've done a deep dive into Africa the last couple of weeks, and things really are remaining pretty much the same. Oh, I've lost you, Brian.
Hi, we've got a record number of viewers today, so really exciting. We've got well over 250, getting close to 300 now. So thank you really much for tuning in. We're getting lots of comments coming out from people. One particular question here, Julia, do you see a trend in the next 6 months where we'll see companies suspend new work permit applications and go for stay put and extend policies? And that's from Priyamada, and I'm not sure where you're from, head of global partnerships at Helmer International.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a really, really good question. I think the question is that they're going to, will you see more employers dealing with extending and turning people's application to permanent leave rather than doing new hires? I think that's the question, Brian, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yes. Well, I do think that will be a bit of a trend. I think that in a way we're seeing that already. There's a huge spike in the US of green card adjustment status applications that we talked about that last week as a strategy to retain people. We're seeing it in China where, and I do think that that's a strategy because you already have the worker, you've already paid the cost of the assignment, and all you're doing is really embedding that person and being allowed to have them for longer.
Okay, thank you. And then I think in the interest of time, we can move you sort of on,
yes,
Julia.
Yes, so just on to Europe, just quickly touching on Europe, the restrictions gradually easing across parts of Europe. Different countries are at different situations, but we have seen a general easing. Italy began lifting some lockdown measures on the 14th of April. Others in Italy will remain in place till May the 3rd. France is gradually introducing a few lifting of restrictions and plans to do so majorly from the 11th of May. Germany, Spain, Denmark are lifting, but the UK continues in lockdown. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to skip some more points about Europe, but now deal with the US.
Perfect. So, just to say, Julia, in terms of comments, your answer there, we got a response saying great answer. So many thanks for that question. There is a question from Fiona Mugino, which we'll deal with later, I hope, which is, Julia, do you think that generally we should be looking to plan well in advance for assignments?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Should we be looking well in advance to plan for assignments?
Oh my gosh, that's the number one question. No, well, the number one strategy, plan very well in advance.
We're going to cover that much more when we've got Ed and Sarah on the panel too. But I think that's a yes. And then other questions. Well, Elizabeth Dillon has said, have you addressed the situation in the United States? In particular, I would like to know if visa processing and green cards have been stopped given Trump's tweets last night. And I know you'll move on that. And also, Andres Gutierrez, good afternoon from Malta. In terms of the latest developments in the US, how do you think this would affect the EB5 route, as the ES2 is a non-immigrant route and presumably won't be affected? So let's move on to North America. I think there's a lot of interest, not unsurprisingly.
Yes. Okay, so just as when we thought things couldn't get more complicated on the global landscape, President Trump announced in a tweet, and it was just after 10 p.m. on Monday, that he would sign an executive order temporarily suspending immigration into the US. And at the time of the tweet, there was no information about the scope of the executive order, whether it would affect immigrant, non-immigrant visa issuancing, foreign national entry through US ports, or immigration benefit processing. And neither was there anything about timing or the duration. Now, I think it's really, really important to remember that already there has been some really numbers of provisions that have been taken in place by the US administration in response to the pandemic. And I talked last week and the week before some points that Charlotte Slocum, who's head of our US consular practice in the UK, was talking about the very limited ability to actually make visa applications and consular applications, and what you should be doing. But I think it's important to remind ourselves that there is a ban on travel into the US from people people coming from China, Iran, the European Schengen area, the UK and Ireland, as well as restrictions on non-essential travel through the US, Canada and the US Mexico land border. And then in addition to this, most visa services at US consulates have been suspended. And since mid-March, we've seen in-person services at USCIS local offices and application support centres. So we have to bear in mind that this new executive order we already have this situation where we have this travel ban. We also have most of the consular is closed. And so what's happened is that yesterday at a press conference, President Trump said the executive order could be signed today. Now, I understand from speaking to our team in Washington that it was being reviewed for clearance by the Office of Legal Counsel of the Justice Department yesterday. So it is possible and quite likely we will see the executive order today, but we need to see the executive order. Now, President Trump at the press conference said it will affect immigrant visas, green cards, and not those who want to seek entry as a temporary basis, like tourists, student, or temporary workers. But I've just explained that those people, they're affected anyway by the travel ban and the consular situation. The ban could bar spouses and relatives of US citizens, as well as foreign workers coming to the US on employment-based green card, but we don't know. We do know that the pause is for 60 days. And I also understand from discussions kind of behind the scenes that there had been plans to make it 90 days, but it's 60 days. But the executive order will actually carry a provision that will allow the president to extend it. So we believe that H-1B specialty occupation visas and L1s and other non-immigrant worker programs won't be affected. But I think what we really need to be concerned about is that the president has hinted that there are more restrictions might be forthcoming, so that we are half expecting a second executive order. And the other thing is that we need a lot of clarification about the green cards, because there's nothing, for example, about whether it affects in-country adjustment status. So in summary, there is a lot of questions to be answered. I think next week I will have a lot of answers, and we will be spending a bit more time on this next week, because we will by that time have the executive order, we'll know exactly who it applies to, and we will have some more hints about whether there's more to follow. I think that's really important.
Okay, that's really helpful. And again, we're getting a huge number of comments in. Just taking one question, and then we'll move on to bring our panel in as well. Is from Kiran Kumar. Kiran says, Julia, what happens to individuals whose US work permits are about to expire in terms of those who are about to complete their tenure in the US? USCIS has asked to file extensions on time, but what happens to those who are about to complete the 6 years on an H-1B?
Yes, I think, to be truthful, I don't know the answer to that, but again, I'll find out for you and let you know. But I can't off the top of my head say what's going to happen. I think everything is like a little bit up in the air at the moment. We should have some, clarification. And I've got Kieran's number, and I will correspond with him afterwards. If he could also connect with me on LinkedIn. I just wanted to say one very quick thing, and then I finished, is that Scott Lieb's Trends report is very interesting, because it does highlight this intensifying of restrictive policies across the world, the rigidity of the immigration systems worldwide, the push for highly skilled workers, and the fact that we are seeing, an increased sort of post-COVID-19 restrictive landscape. So I think, those are just some of the trends, but I think also they were touched upon in a way in your questions about, making sure that we plan ahead.
Okay, Julia, we could go on for hours, I think, talking about the implications of this tweet in particular. and what that might mean. But I think there'll be a lot of guesswork going on until we actually see an executive order. We do promise we will be back next week. And as I said, we've got Lynn Shotwell as well from ERC on board. So it'll be a great show next week. But Julia will be, fully up to speed on all the latest developments around the world as ever, and will be giving us a really detailed update on whatever we know, if anything, on what's going on with that executive order. What I do want to do, though, is to now bring in our panelists, and I'm delighted to say I bring them in. We've got Ed Hannibal here from Deloitte, and also Ed, of course, is the chairman of Worldwide ERC. And also we've got Sarah Hunt, who is the head of global mobility for Mondelez. So we've got a great panel. And maybe I'll just start with you, if I may, Ed, and just put that Deloitte hat to one side for the moment, and just on the ERC, the Worldwide ERC side. I know that there's been some pretty serious lobbying efforts going on to help the mobility industry, and obviously very many of our people, if not most of the people here on this video today, are from the mobility industry, and we've all been very, very severely affected. So can you tell us a little bit about what initiatives Worldwide ERC has been doing to help the industry? And obviously I'll pick this up more with Lynn next week.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian. I really appreciate you including me, and happy to utilize my my ERC hat, if you will, or personality, whatever that may be. So the global advocacy has been our focus at really right down to the grindstone for the last, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks. I, first of all, can't be more excited for our new CEO and president, Lynn Shotwell. Quite honestly, she was hovering in the background before she even joined, in helping us, as we knew we needed to really lean in this advocacy space. So Lynn, supported by, first of all, our government affairs committees, our government affairs leader, Tristan North, and our VP of strategy, Karen. We have already submitted 2 letters to Congress asking for support. We recognize that the entire ecosystem, end to end, is made up of all kinds of organizations, but there are a lot of small organizations. Everyone is impacted, but the smaller organizations are certainly hit hard, as we all are working through this overall global stoppage. Most recently, this past Monday, we submitted our second letter. First letter was March 20th, second letter was April 20th, really asking Congress for stimulus support. Be happy to share that letter with anyone, but I will get in front of that. One of the things that you'll be seeing very quickly in this global advocacy space is the capability for any of our members to access through our website and to utilize the tools and the letters to put in front of your local government officials to really help at a local level as you're asking and working for stimulus and support. So you'll see more of this. Lynn is leading the charge, and this is a global effort. The other thing to point out, we have been building coalition, working with trying to work with and support the American Moving and Storage Association, International Association of Movers, while at the same time we're trying to build out those adjacencies to the others that are right next to us and the others who have similar interests. So as much as we can do, we know that it is a challenging time navigating through this pandemic. I'll stop there, Brian.
Okay, thank you very much, Ed. That's really, really helpful. I mean, ERC is doing a fabulous job at the moment, and I mean, any coordination that we can do internationally for our industry, I think, is really, this is the time when our industry has to pull together. This is an area where we're just all facing completely unknown times together, and I think the level of sharing that's going on in the industry at the moment is very, very heartwarming. And all, big shout out to you, Ed, and everybody at ERC. Let's move on now. Let's just talk about the response to the crisis. And what I'd like to do is bring to the conversation Sarah. So Sarah from from Mondelez, Sarah Hunt from Mondelez. There you are, Sarah. Can you just tell us a little bit about, or tell us a bit about your program to start with? I mean, I think probably most people know your brands, if not necessarily the name of the company.
Sure.
But your brands. Tell us a bit about your program and what happened when it all sort of started, and where you were. Did you have stranded employees that were in the wrong place, employees that were scared and panicked, and how did this all pan out for Mondelez? But tell us a bit about your program first.
Sure. So we have about 185 international assignees, both short-term and long-term. And then we also move around 400 to 450 permanent moves per year. So what we haven't seen, we have not needed to do for the most part, is repatriate our expats. Most of them are staying in place, staying in country, and following the local country guidelines. We have, we're working through every situation case by case, because that's really what you can do at this time. You can't really apply broad general guidelines, I would say, in a lot of our situations. And we're also, we're in a certain kind of industry where we have a lot of people all over the world in like one or two, whereas other industries I know may have, big groups of people in different locations. So
anybody know your major brands are?
Oh, Cadbury, Oreo, Milka. Those are
good.
Good ones. Yeah. So we're a snacking company, and honestly, it's a good time to be in snacks. I'd say that when a lot of companies right now are laying people off. Certainly in the U.S., we're hiring right now, manufacturing and sales roles. So that's a silver lining. We work for an industry that people really need right now. It's one thing that helps, I think, people stay or feel a little more normal. And certainly with kids at home, I can tell you we go through a lot of snacks. So, but yeah, so I think that, yes, we definitely have people stranded in the wrong countries. We've got all sorts of unique situations like that. We have a big commuter population in Europe that commutes into Zurich, and they're all at home at the moment in their home countries, working from home, even though that's, technically not, shouldn't be. But we are working very closely with our corporate tax folks as well to monitor all these people that are working in the wrong country. We've also had, of course, a number of people that were about to move that aren't able to move. So a lot of them have been put into, remote working situations, and we're just working very closely with corporate tax to monitor those situations. And I think the big unknown for us is how long are we going to be in this situation, and at what point do we need to consider that we may have to cancel this move? What's the talent planning behind that for those folks? So I feel like there's still a tremendous amount of unknowns for us. But in general, like I said, our expats, for the most part, have stayed in place, and they're not, we had a few that have asked to come back, and we've totally supported that, supported flights for the families, car rentals, we've had to extend temporary living in some places. So we're just trying to, case by case, making sure that we're really focused on supporting our employees.
Okay, I'll bring Ed into the conversation too. The reason I'm bringing Ed into the conversation now, Ed, if you could sort of metaphorically just switch hats, we'll take the ERC hat off and put the Deloitte hat back on. I know that at Deloitte, you've been doing some work on preparing for COVID-19 responses, and in particular, I think you started to pull together a model which I think you've called Respond, Recover, Thrive. And what I understand, it's all about the first stage is how we manage the business continuity. That's probably the stage that many people have been in for the last couple of weeks. And then there's the stage about how you recover and how you emerge. You learn, you emerge stronger. And then finally, there's the Thrive stage where you prepare for the next normal, the new normal, and you think to get some level of competitive advantage in whatever the new world looks like. I was wondering if we could talk about some of the areas where that might apply. And I know that at Deloitte, you've sort of worked something up there, and I'm sure you'll be happy to share it with people who might be interested. And maybe the first area we could talk about is this whole question of global workforce planning. And I don't know, the question was actually asked by one of the people of Julia earlier was the question about, should we be planning ahead for assignments? So I suppose that's probably the first area we should be looking at, what kind of workforce planning we should be doing. And maybe you could talk about that, like theoretically, then maybe Sarah could say a little bit about what you might actually be doing, on a more sort of, nuts and bolts level.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Folks, you'll see a lot about respond, recover, thrive. It applies to, I think every function inside of a business. But from a workforce planning perspective right now, it's really mobility, getting as close as possible, and very fluid discussions with the business. So first of all, and Sarah started to hint at this, I think, a little bit earlier on, there's one, managing the shortages around talent that we still have. We still have to execute for the business. We have to execute for customers, while at the same time doing extremely fluid, and it may mean multiple activities around the talent planning for tomorrow and the day after that. And part of that then also relates to Julia's piece around navigating this sort of governmental changes, the regulatory changes, these lockdowns and restrictions. And it also hints into the real need to also be collaborating at the same time with your vendors and within the company to pull all the data necessary to make some of these decisions. Again, that Sarah was really thinking through, what are we doing today? Do we need to think about repatriations? Do we need to think about other alternatives? We've just proven, and this is the most exciting point, mobility is continuing to expand. We just proved that mobility has a whole category of virtual mobility, but there's a lot of add-on factors that will come from that. But we've just proven that. My mother, who would kill me if I talked about her age, learned how to use Zoom. She's been teaching special education for over 50 years, and she's teaching special needs children, very young children, how to read via Zoom. We're all developing this new workforce capability to be virtual.
So thank you very much. I mean, you talked about, people of a certain age you using Zoom, and I've certainly seen it amongst my own family. There is apparently a phrase that they're calling us now baby Zoomers. Where we are now. I've had a couple of questions coming in, actually, both for Sarah and for Ed, and I'll just read those out, and then we can sort of maybe take those questions. So, Sarah, the question for you was, what changes, if any, are you foreseeing in your mobility policies and programs? Okay, and whilst you think about that, I'll just ask Ed his questions. I'll give you a second or two to get your thought together. And Ed, the question for you is, considering the future expansion of virtual work, what kind of tax impacts do you think governments might now go to? Does Deloitte think that virtual work may now look more highly scrutinized by country tax authorities, and how might that look? So there you go. I'll give you a chance to think about that. But let's get back to Sarah and her question, which was, what changes do you think you might be putting in place?
It is a really good question, and I'm not sure that we're in a position to really say yet what our policy changes may or may not need to be. So I think I don't feel comfortable even in making any recommendations on policy changes yet, because the situation is just so fluid. I feel like our current policies are helping us manage our unique situations. And so, yeah, I don't have a crystal ball. I really do wish I had one. I keep thinking that if I could just see into the future, it'd be so much easier to know how to go about planning. So, yeah, what I do see, though, potentially, certainly in the next year or so, probably a decrease in moves, trying to make sure we're getting people home where they need to get home, whatever home is. And the whole virtual working is a huge topic for us. It's been a huge topic for us for quite a while. We have a lot of commuters. We have a lot of people living in one country, working in another country. Our company has been, I think, ahead of the curve on the virtual work. There's definitely We've had the tools in place for years now to work at home. So I think it was a pretty easy transition for corporate Mondelez to just kind of keep going. But yeah, it's the virtual work one is a big question for me too. And what kind of scrutiny we will get on that, because I see that as more of a trend. I mean, we're proving that people can do their jobs, not necessarily in the country that they're working for. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a great answer. I mean, basically the answer is we've got to keep the matter under review, and the things are going to change. We don't necessarily know what those changes are going to be going forward. Now, in terms of comments coming in, we're getting a lot of comments. Martin Foxwell, to you, Ed. A shout out to Mom, attaboy. So there you are. Your mum's becoming famous too. And Michael Cadden from Living Abroad has highlighted they got on virtual assignments during the pandemic. So if anybody's interested, the link is there in the feed. Just a shout out for us at Benevo, we are launching, it'll be out in the next day or so, a remobilization checklist. We've come up with a series of questions that this is free to anybody to take. It'll be on our website, and we'll probably mail it out shortly. So that you can you have the question to ask. We're not giving any answers, but we're hoping to give you the question to ask and share with your team. But Ed, you were asked the question about, do you think there'll be greater scrutiny of tax arrangements when people are increasingly working from home or maybe going on virtual assignments, etc.?
Yeah, Brian, thanks, and thanks for the question. Look, I think we're seeing a rebalance of the kind of mobility swim lanes and what companies are going to use. The traditional expats, the sort of, are we going to see more of those, or the local pluses, and then sort of short-term assignments. At the same time, I think we're probably going to see a rebalance and probably a squeezing down of the business travelers. What is non-essential business travel. But at the same time, and the reason I layer that in is that I think some of the concerns that we've all scratched our head and navigated on the corporate side on the business travel piece now become very real in a virtual world. So again, I think, everybody, this has to be hard. I feel like I travel around my condo in Chicago, so we're not going very far, but we've all proven that we can work virtually. As the virtual workers, and you think about not only this moment, but actually starting to leverage more and more virtual workers, I think we believe it will start to potentially trigger some local regulatory and compliance issues. So, for example, will we see a rise in things like permanent establishment questions around the virtual workforce? Similar to Sarah, I think it's still early days, but as we start to really build the muscle and leverage virtual mobility as a real policy and part of the moving forward, the thrive in the workforce, I think we'll start to see government and regulatory scrutiny of where those virtual workers will be. Brian, it's still early days, but I think everybody here, it's been tough. Pat yourself on the back. You're 6 to 8 weeks in of making virtual mobility work.
Yeah, I mean, the world is clearly changing in ways that we could not have imagined 6 weeks ago. I suspect the way we work has changed more in 6 weeks than it has in the last 30 years in many ways. But I think there are certain things that I believe are inevitable. And one of them, I think, as we come out of this, is there's going to be a big focus on cost. Companies, there's going to be a nervousness of travel, undoubtedly. Maybe people will get over that in a period of time, but initially there'll be a lot of nervousness. There'll be a lot of de-globalization going on. People saying we need, industries saying we need supply chains closer to home. And we've seen that, especially with some of the announcements from President Trump, but we're seeing that worldwide. We're seeing a rise of nationalism over globalization. Clearly, all that affects us in our industry. But also, I think, just as companies struggle to survive and as cash dries up, we're going to see a focus on cost like we've never seen before. And I think we'll come on to that again a bit later on in terms of how we're going to have to, manage costs. And I suspect low-cost solutions, and I suppose I'm a little bit biased because Benivo is in many ways a low-cost solution to mobility. Low-cost solutions, I think, are going to be, and technology-based solutions are going to be, much more in vogue than the more sort of white glove solutions that we've had in the past. But some questions that are coming through. I'll just read some questions out. Sarah, from Laura Rodriguez. What can you share about medical coverage concerns for this virus for people away from home? Has existing international or country medical coverages worked sufficiently well? How are employees feeling about security of access to healthcare? And I believe I'll bring out another question from Pankaj Bhatia. Thanks, Sarah. What challenges have you faced through the process? What are the learnings, and what do you think would have equipped you better to handle such challenges in the future? And then one more question: how does the workforce planning? How will workforce planning be affected post COVID-19, especially in the banking sector? I appreciate you're in the chocolate sector, so
I can speak to banking, yes. Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to talk about banking.
Yeah.
Ed can comment on that one. But on those first 2 points, Sarah, I don't know if you've got any thoughts.
Well, I mean, of course, making sure that all of our employees have access to medical care is, a no-brainer. We have to do that. Obviously, our international assignment population are all covered under our international healthcare plans, which are covering COVID treatment, COVID testing, if the local government authorities aren't covering it. So, and then as far as other people, again, nobody's in a country without health insurance, whether it's through a state-sponsored plan or through, a private plan. So we haven't had any, that I'm aware of, any problems with people being able to access medical care. And we've, of course, confirmed that with our insurance companies as well, our international ones. I forgot, what was the second point about? Oh, workforce planning, right?
Yeah, the question was what learning, what have you seen, what learning are you taking away, that things that, heaven forbid, this all happened again, what have you learned now that you didn't know 2 months ago?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll just say, as an introvert, sometimes I have to think about things, so I'll have the best answer for you in about 2 hours. Because it does take me a while to process questions like that.
Let's throw that one to Ed. I mean, what learnings have you seen?
I think the biggest learning is the need to actually be agile. We literally had to flip to being a virtual organization and to serve our clients. And this isn't bragging rights. I think it's just because we work in a global world, so we are always on calls day and night. It just meant we are now much more of a Skype, Zoom culture. So you just had to be agile.
Yeah, and I would say resilience too. I mean, I have a global team behind me, and these are some of the smartest, most caring people, and they've really come together. It's made me just really appreciate them even more. What a fantastic job they're doing, making sure that our employees are safe, that they feel comfortable. So, but I'm sure there's a ton of learnings we're going to have from this.
Okay, what I'd like to do now is bring our last guest onto the show for our last segment. I'm delighted to have also with us Nitsan Yudan from my company, from Benivo, and we're actually doing a session tomorrow on the it's too grand a word, but I like to put the humanitarian tool we put out, but certainly the pro bono tool. And we're doing a full hour's demo on that tomorrow at 3 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. Eastern. But Nitsan, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about it at this stage for the last few minutes of our session today.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks to all the experts for really insightful sessions. I definitely took the notes and learned a few things. What I want to talk and give maybe a promo today from tomorrow show is the tool that we've launched for COVID support, which we are offering for free for clients and also for non-clients. So anyone who has assignees or people who relocated recently, we are all under a stressful time, but obviously being on a different country makes it more stressful. And what we've done is we've built a platform that helps reduce that stress, help deliver helpful resources, local resources. And what is really exciting of what happened in the last week are two things. First, we've got a lot of engagement for the entire industry. And it's really heartwarming to see so many suppliers, vendors coming together and providing additional content that we all post now under the Benivo platform. And I'll show more of that tomorrow. And I give a quick look now on this and share a lot more on how that works tomorrow, but you can already have a quick view of the tool. It's branded for every company and has all the information under different areas with regards to local health and transport, and then mental health and information we got from Fragomen about immigration, from the Impact Group, REA partner, support, Net Expact, King Mayer, Global Excel, WordPad, really a long list of suppliers in the industry that all contributed content and advice to the platform, and that's all provided for free. And what is also we've made a commitment is to go live in 3 days and solve any challenge that a company has in 3 working days. And one of the challenges that we got last week were something that apparently a lot of companies are facing at the moment. They don't know exactly where are their employees. And we've built a solution that actually provides a map of where are the employees at every given moment, so the company can know that, can know what is the latest status, can drill down, of course, into the data, and I'll show a lot more of that tomorrow. But just a quick look into this tool that provides companies with the ability to know where are their employees, and it's all data protection compliance. So a lot more is coming tomorrow, but that's just a taster of that free tool. And for suppliers who are on this call and want also to contribute content and join that free project and free resource, please be in touch. And any corporates who want to implement or raise a challenge that they have, again, looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thank you so much, Nitzan. We're coming really to the end of the show today. We've had a record number of people viewing in, and I'm sure we'll get many thousands more over the next few days. It's been really good having everyone on the show. Once again, many thanks to Julia Onslow-Cole. Your tour de force, as I said at the beginning, it is legendary, becoming even more legendary. And with the changes in the last 24 hours in US immigration, this is incredibly topical. But Julie will be back with me next week and we'll discuss everything in more detail. Many thanks to Sarah Hunt from Mondelez for all your insights. We really appreciate your time and all your insights. I know people got lots of questions. I'll be surprised if you don't get LinkedIn messages and emails asking for more information, but thank you for sharing. It's really helpful. And Ed, both with your Deloitte and your Worldwide ERC hat on, many thanks for sharing and participating. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Lastly, to Nitzan, many thanks for again being on the show, albeit for just a few minutes. And as I said to everybody, we'll be back again tomorrow this time. For anybody who wants to see a full demo, it is very exciting technology, and I said it's completely free. There's no catches. Doesn't matter whether you're a Benivo client or not a client, Fragomen client, not a client. This is available to anybody to use at the moment. And then, of course, this show, The View from the Top, will again be back again this time next week. Next Wednesday, I'll be back with Julia, and our special guest next week will be Lynn Chotwell, who's the president and CEO of Worldwide ERC. So all that remains for me to thank everybody in LinkedIn world and Facebook Live world for for taking part in the show. It's been great having you and participating. And thank you, of course, to all our guests for taking part. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Bye-bye.
Thank you.